met here, and he got his OR interest and inclination as an undergrad OR major, or maybe was it IUR at this point, I don't know. Maybe it was ORIE major. He graduated in, I shouldn't say that. Okay, 1980. Then he went to the Stanford Business School and became an economist, and now is at Maryland as an economist. I actually met Peter professionally at a Dutch 2 meeting, where within seconds we realized that we have a shared Cornell root, even though I admit in 1980 I wasn't here. And we have been collaborating ever since. It's this field that maybe my community likes calling algorithmic game theory. That's an intersection between econ, game, computer science, and OR. There's a lot of interesting questions between data and incentives, and Peter has been one of the leading proponents from the econ side to actually participate in interdisciplinary collaboration. Beyond his interest in algorithmic game theory, he has done a lot in auction design and has been involved in all kinds of practical designs. When I first met him, he was talking about, I think it was Newark Airport's landing spots, some airport landing spots where they're auctioning off which airline can land in what kind of minutes, how many airplanes they can land in which hour, or whatever the auction design was. He has been involved in spectrum auction. He both designed auctions and advised companies in how to run auctions, and generally he's going to tell us more, and advise companies and countries actually about how to run this kind of auctions. He's going to tell us something about this, which is fascinating. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. It's a great joy to be here, an honor, and I'm very much a Cornell family. I have, my family, 3 generations of my family. My mother is here in the audience, and although she didn't graduate from Cornell, my father has been on the faculty for decades, and I have many brothers and nephews and nieces with Cornell degrees, so it's really always wonderful to come back to Cornell. And the air slot auctions, which in fact I did do many years ago, hired by the FAA to design and implement for the New York City airports. This is a good example because this is something that was all set to go. We were, the software had been done, the entire design, the bidders organized and eligibility established and so on. And then 2 weeks before the first auction, it was canceled by Congress. Auctions were banned for air slots in New York City. And so this is a good example of sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't, but I moved on. So I'm going to give just a very quick tour of some of the applications that I've been involved in market design. It is an emerging field, and it's a very exciting field for today because what's happening with technologies have really enabled much better markets, and that's what this is all about. What we do is try to establish effective rules of market interaction, and the rules really do matter. If you have bad rules, the market can fail, you can have the global financial crisis, the stakes can be quite enormous. It's very much, I like to call it economic engineering. And I guess because of my economics degree, I put the economics up front. But economics certainly plays a very important role, and I think that the insights from economics have a lot to do with the modeling of incentives, understanding incentives, and but operations research also plays a very important role in the optimization and development of the algorithms. Computer science plays an enormous role, largely for the computation and the development of algorithms. There's behavioral aspects that are important in real markets often, so psychology steps in, and often there is other engineering disciplines that are relevant in particular sectors, whether it be communications or transportation or whatever. The good market design really does matter. It can greatly improve the efficient allocation of the scarce resources, make sure the production is done by the right people and the consumption is, the right people are consuming. Prices are often very important, and getting the prices right can make the difference between sending the right incentives for investment and having poor investment. In market design, we attempt to mitigate market failures. Two very important market failures are excessive risk that can lead to market failure, as for example, the California energy crisis, and lack of competition. So we try to design the market rules to intensify competition and enable the market participants to manage risk. The two big application areas in market design have been matching, so matching students to schools, kidneys to patients, doctors to hospitals, etc. These are often instances where money is not involved and doesn't play an important role. The areas that I've especially focused on are auctions, which can be thought of matching with money. So money plays and prices play a very important role. And I'm going to talk briefly about electricity markets, communication markets, transportation markets, financial securities, all very important areas and where these tools can be quite useful. I won't have time to talk about many other applications, but you'll get the gist. One thing I like about market design is the problems are very basic and the solutions are often easy to sum up in just a few words. So I went through each of these application areas and I tried to come up with a few words that summed up what was really important in transforming the market. And this is very nice. So it's not really this great arcane problem that you can't explain to your mother. In fact, I can't explain these things to my mother, and in these simple terms. So when I think about wholesale electricity markets, the great transformation occurred with two ideas. The first one was open access, the idea that you couldn't withhold transmission capacity, and that everybody got access to the transmission capacity on non-discriminatory terms. That's fundamental to wholesale electricity markets around the world. And the second is pay for performance, which has to do with well-designed products that give consumers what the consumers need and send the right price signals. So I'll talk very briefly about those. In communications, it's one of the ideas was auctioning spectrum, which started in the United States in 1994. Looking to the future, many of the things I'm going to talk about actually haven't yet been developed. There's still obvious ideas that need to be developed, and things are that there's some challenges that are holding them back, like in the air slot example. But the next wave in mobile communications, I believe, is going to be open access, adopting the open access framework from electricity into mobile communications to greatly facilitate trade, whereas right now we have essentially no trade. In transportation, pricing congestion in urban areas is going to be really important, and then the next wave beyond that is going to be not just pricing, but scheduling of transportation. And this will happen. We saw a video of beginning to happen, and this is definitely, in the next 20 years, it's going to be transformed. And the OR and market design tools are going to be very important in that transformation. Climate policies, very important, closely tied to electricity. The two words there are price carbon. And I'll talk a bit about that. And then finally, in financial securities, make time discrete. And I'll explain why that's very, very quickly. Now, even though these ideas, I suspect everybody can see them and understand them and recognize that, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea, we should do that. In some cases we have done that, in many cases we haven't. And the reason we haven't is because of the resistance to market reforms. That generally in markets, there are inefficiencies, and there's some people that are benefiting from those inefficiencies. And that's what's hard to get the reform. So when I go to the regulator and I say, look, if we just make this very simple change, then we can save $10 billion a year. Well, then there's going to be somebody else in Wall Street that marches up to the regulator and says, hey, that's my $10 billion. And so they're not quite so excited about the reform. And in general, the big problem that we face in market design is getting things implemented. And the reason is distribution tends to trump efficiency. So the special interests that would be harmed by a more efficient solution will get in the way. And this is stated very clearly by one of my heroes, Milton Friedman, who's talking about the tyranny of the status quo, and that this is especially true in government situations such as regulated markets. And what we tend to, in order to have change occur, tends to be when there's a crisis. And when there's a crisis, then all of a sudden, we know we have to change something, and it's really important to have good, sensible design plans available, ready to go, that can be slid in order to rectify the situation. Because something's going to change, and hopefully it'll be a good one. So it's my belief, and Milton Friedman said it very well, that that's very much our role, is to have these, to look for these opportunities where there is an opportunity for change, and then leap in with good ideas at that moment. And then once that change occurs, and then you have data that demonstrates that, this actually worked, and it worked quite well, then it can spread all over the world. And we've seen that in a number of areas, but the one that I was most involved in was the spectrum auctions, which started in the United States, but then the good designs spread, and now it's worldwide. So market design, you might think of it is this emerging area, but it's very connected to a lot of things that we do in economics and we do in operations research. And this is just a list of the Nobel Prizes in economics that have been awarded for things related to our market design work, and building on the disciplines of game theory, behavioral and experimental economics, and then I've got market design separately. But the one that's really the market design award is 2012, Al Roth and Lloyd Shapley, who both, I think many would consider operations researchers. Certainly that was Al's PhD, and Lloyd was a mathematician, but certainly he's a mainline OR guy. So this is actually very much mainstream, and there's I spoke with some junior faculty here at Cornell who are in the market design area. So that's very nice. When thinking about designing markets, one has to start with objectives, and that's always the first thing that I ask. What are you trying to accomplish? I have typically 4 objectives that I focus on generically: efficiency, simplicity, transparency, and fairness. And I try to keep these in mind. Typically, there's other objectives in particular circumstances, but that's the first step. Now what I want to do is turn to the applications and talk through these very quickly. But I'm going to start with electricity markets and skip over spectrum auctions for the most part. Right now there's a major, highly innovative spectrum auction ongoing, the Broadcast Incentive Auction in the United States, which is repurposing TV spectrum to mobile communications as a higher value use. This particular auction is one that is incredibly complicated. It's the most complicated auction ever by orders of magnitude. And it involves enormous combinatorial optimization at every stage in the auction. And I've been working on it for a few years now, and it's been a lot of fun. But there's lots of operations research in this auction and many, and certainly in the electricity markets. So this is the control room, one of the desks of the control room of the Texas system operator, and it looks like any other control room in today's restructured electricity markets. But where the action is really happening is an adjacent server farm that has literally thousands of servers and massive air conditioning systems, because these servers are every minute of the day, 24/7, are doing these vast combinatorial optimizations in order to say who should be generating how much electricity and where that electricity should be going to and how it should be priced. So that's all working behind the scenes, and it's quite an elaborate set of market rules that translates the preferences of the generators and the preferences of the demand side, and then optimizes. And the objective is very simple. It's basically maximize social welfare. It's just maximizing gains from trade, subject to constraints. And there's a lot of constraints in an electricity network, all governed by engineering laws. So that's why this is basically a very nice OR problem, but it's a very nice economic problem as well. And and of course what makes it so challenging is because it is combinatorial optimization. It's not simply linear optimization. There's lots of non-convexities that have to be addressed in the electricity market, and that makes it, we try to linearize whenever possible, and we actually do make a great effort to get linear prices out of a system that fundamentally can't always produce them. But the linear prices are very simple to understand and actually can do a pretty good job. Now, the goal of the electricity market is to provide least cost electricity reliably to consumers, but it can be broken down into short run efficiency and long run efficiency. Short run is that least cost optimization. So it's straightforward, incredibly complicated OR problem, and the real trick, and so that's basically been solved and has very nice locational marginal pricing for at every node in the system of these restructured markets. Long-run efficiency is the real challenge of electricity restructuring, and that is having the market send the right price signals to induce efficient investment. And this is where the two are linked. If you've got the wrong short-run prices, there's no way you're going to achieve long-run efficiency. So short-run efficiency is sort of a prerequisite, and we work really hard on that, and then tie in the extra elements that are needed to support long-run investment. But the whole key idea of the restructured market has come from this idea of open access, which essentially mandates that the locational marginal pricing, where you have you're essentially pricing congestion in the network efficiently.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So once you set the short-term prices, those are the prices. What freedom do you have to control the long-term effects?
So the long-term. So you've got these short-run prices at every location over time. So the answer is basically, and this is going to come to the how you make the long-term market work. So essentially, it's what do you do in circumstances where you're in scarcity? You do not have enough supply to satisfy demand, and demand is unwilling to be responsive. And so then you have So the issue there is the regulator or the system operator has to step and have market rules that specify what happens in scarcity, and that's a scarcity price. And so it's these scarcity prices in early electricity markets were much too low to support efficient investment. And that was the problem, one of the problems with the California electricity crisis in 2000, 2001 was, in part, there was, the biggest problem then was that everything was relying on short-term, the short-term market, the spot market. And when there was scarcity, then prices were so high that the unhedged utilities went bankrupt very quickly, and then trade couldn't take place. But now we understand that, in fact, it's very important to have these medium-term and long-term markets where people can lock in prices and make plans on a longer-term basis, and that enables them to manage risk. And it also reduces market power problems, and that's what we need for the long-run investment. So basically, the spot markets early on were inadequate because they didn't recognize the importance of effective scarcity pricing. And in fact, the reaction to scarcity in California, which just made the crisis that much worse, was to ramp down the scarcity prices. But now, for example, in Texas, we have, during scarcity, the price is $9,000 per megawatt hour. You know, orders of magnitude higher than it is otherwise. And actually, let me say one other thing on this with respect to pay for performance. So this is the in the long-term markets, in particular capacity markets, are tied to the product definition is tied to performance during scarcity. And so it effectively is a call option where you're obligated to supply during these scarcity periods, or you have to buy somebody else that can supply for you at that very high scarcity price. So this brings me to climate policy, which is very much related to electricity, since electricity produces about 60% of the carbon emissions today, hopefully less in the future, much less in the future. Here our focus is thinking about international climate negotiations as a market design problem. And how would we want to structure the rules of the international negotiations in order to foster cooperation among the countries? And the idea here is in the title, Price Carbon, I Will If You Will, where pricing carbon is our the instrument that we use, the common reciprocal commitment, that's the I will if you will, that makes this all work. Now, why price carbon? Well, it's a direct instrument that affects parties' incentives directly. It's efficient, and then you get the efficient abatement. I mean, we have this common global price for carbon, and it's a transparent measure. And what we're adding to the mix is that, in fact, it actually promotes international cooperation because it's a simple instrument that is, we would argue, focal for the first three reasons. And it's an excellent basis for the reciprocal commitment that is going to enable countries to come together. And so we propose a carbon price path as a common commitment, focal common commitment, that depends on there's two instruments. One, the carbon price, which is the intensity of effort of all of us, all countries together. And then second, a way to address the enormous asymmetries among countries. And this is a green fund where those that are high per capita emitters of carbon, like the United States, pay into the green fund, and those that are not, like India, receive from the green fund to compensate them for otherwise they wouldn't be interested in doing the efficient level of abatement. Now let me turn to the future, and we've actually talked a lot about the past, and we've talked a lot about the future. The future I want to talk about first is mobile communications. I've already mentioned mobile communications briefly. This again this is still the Texas System Control Center for electricity, not mobile communications. But someday there'll be a control center that will look like this for mobile communications, where there's actually trade occurring. When we think about communications markets, all markets in the world started out as a monopoly with Ma Bell. And then in the 90s, we introduced spectrum auctions, which created an oligopoly. So now we have, with mobile communications now, in virtually every country, there's 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 carriers that provide the communication throughput. And the reason that there's a small number is because there's an enormous entry barrier. To enter the US market would cost about $40 billion, about $20 billion for spectrum and about $20 billion for infrastructure, and not many of us have $40 billion around, nor would we probably want to spend $40 billion to be the number 5 player in the US market, where the number 4 player is barely being able to evade bankruptcy. So competition is a serious problem. How can we invigorate this competition and have more of an internet ecosystem in mobile communications? And the answer is the same answer as in electricity, open access. So if we create one network that is an open access network and operates under those principles, then that's a market that really enables very low cost entry, maybe $40,000 rather than $40 billion, because now I just have to understand, to be a service provider, I just have to understand the demand side, put together products that folks want, and then buy the network throughput I need on competitive terms in this open access wireless market. So that's the idea. And the market model is the same as for wholesale electricity, where we have a wholesale market, the open access wireless network that's providing the supply, and then service providers, whether virtual or physical, compete for that network throughput, which then they sell in the retail market to the consumers and the literally billions of devices that will come with the Internet of Things. Now, the way this market works, and this is actually a very simple market because it doesn't have the non-convexities that you have in electricity, so everything becomes linear. You can have a very simple market to price network throughput at every time and location. And the proposal that we've put forward is that all these products, this time and locational product of network throughput, be traded with simple single price auctions, as illustrated here. And there's actually a number of opportunities to implement this in the United States through a public safety initiative that the U.S. has started, and it's been going on, and it's going to be resolved beginning this year in places like Mexico, where they've got a very serious competition problem, and so they've set aside a large amount of spectrum for an open access network, and that also is taking place this year. So this is something that is, it's new, but it is going to happen, and it's probably going to happen fairly quickly. We built a prototype auction platform, which I showed. This is the most important screen for the service providers. They're bidding for, this is Manhattan peak product in the monthly market. So we recognize from the electricity experience that we actually need to have not just a spot product, but longer term products so that the service providers can make plans and lock in prices and so on. But the bidding is very simple with the preference is specified as a piecewise linear downward sloping demand curve, which keeps everything super simple and should work quite well. So this hasn't been built yet. I mean, the system's been built, but it hasn't been rolled out. But we're hoping in not too many years. Yes?
Where is the, if you go to the last slide, the shape of the curve?
So the shape of the curve is just you're expressing, as a service provider, price quantity pairs that are then connected, and so that's just what the bidder's preference, whatever they want.
So there's this one piece where it is extremely steep. What is that? Is there an intuition of why those are like that? No. In fact, this is just an example, and it is So basically, and the way that this is for this monthly product, this is going to be an ascending clock auction, so we're going to start here at low prices and then go up. And so these prices are locked in. These are the ones they're accepting bids for right now, all prices between $3 and $4. And then this is actually the future, so they can actually change those prices, so that steepness may be just an aberration. Let me turn to the future of transportation, which we've already, Lee's talked about. I think others mentioned it as well. And here we are going to see radical transformation. It's going to take a while, though. We're not going to have the driverless cars right away. I wish we would. I wish we'd have them next year. I'd be happy to pay for mine because it just would be a much better experience. But here again, the basic principle of the market is can be much like mobile communications or the restructured electricity market, where we have the idea of open access, and then how do you ration the excess demand with price? So efficient congestion pricing. And then the next step is going to be the devices, so we can actually implement today, and what enables this is actually something from mobile communications, is the fact that we can know the location of every device within a cubic meter today in any second. And so that enables us to do all sorts of wonderful pricing of lanes, of everything. And in fact, we can do much more because we can actually schedule transportation. So I will simply express my preferences over going from where I am to where I want to go, and then my transportation will be scheduled, and congestion will be entirely eliminated. So quite a different world, maybe not so relevant for Ithaca, but certainly relevant for New York City and other urban areas. Okay, that was transportation very quickly. Yes?
How do you get people to build the underlying network? How do you get people with that issue?
The underlying transportation network. And with mobile communications and yes. So in all of these, that's actually part of the beauty of it, is that this system, when you create a nice market like this and you have efficient congestion pricing, so these time and locational markets, all those prices are actually sending very good information about where new elements, new infrastructure needs to be built, and so that's a huge advance from what we have today, where we don't have price signals. And so we're just making pretty much arbitrary decisions about what to build where.
but having those real-time time and locational pricing is enormously beneficial for the investment decisions. Now, last thing I wanted to turn to is financial markets and financial securities. Now, this actually is the New York Stock Exchange, the modern New York Stock Exchange, which looks like a server farm, very interesting. Which actually could look like, this is what the system operator looks like for electricity in Texas or any other market. Server farm. There's one big difference. In the server farm for the electricity market, that all those servers are used to do massive computation in order to solve the optimization to maximize social welfare. In financial securities, if this was NASDAQ, in trading, it trades thousands of equities, one of the largest exchanges in the world. All of its trades take place through a single thread of a single core of a single computer. So even though there's all these computers, what are those servers for? Well, those are other traders. So every trader has their own server that's co-located with New York Stock Exchange and with NASDAQ and with the 13 other equity, and then with each of the dark pools as well. So it's really interesting. How can NASDAQ do that? They must not be doing any computation, because you can't do computation if it's all through a single thread of a single core of a single computer. And the answer is they are doing no computation, none whatsoever. And why do they do that? You think that there would be some benefit to computation and having a more sophisticated way for parties to express preferences. Well, the reason is a basic flaw in our current financial markets is that the continuous time trading, where orders are processed in serial, and that's what's incredibly important. So for any security, there's the order book sitting there. Here's the best ask, and here's the best bid. And this is the bid-ask spread, and so the fair price is somewhere between the best ask and the best bid right here. But then what happens is the world changes. There's some event, some announcement from the Fed or whatever, and all of a sudden the fair price is up here. So what happens is everybody races in and tries to pick off these stale asks and make some money. And that's essentially a prize for whoever is fastest. And that actually is the fuel for the arms race for speed, which you've read a lot about, I'm sure, where we've had enormous innovation in speed in financial security markets over the last 2 decades, especially the last decade, and huge investments in speed. But in fact, what does it bring us? Yes, the market is faster. So now we've got these, people react in microseconds and soon picoseconds to information. But does it actually improve capital investment? No, not at all. And so together with my co-authors, we wrote a paper on, we studied this problem and from a market design perspective, and created theory and data that showed that in fact this is that there's large dollars involved, the race is very costly, and that cost is borne by you and me, fundamental investors, our retirement accounts, and so on. And so now what's the solution? So again, I look for direct, simple solutions that address the problem, and the solution here is rather than trade continuously, trade in discrete time. So if we move, which we call frequent batch auctions, so rather than processing the orders in serial, collect orders over a batch interval of, say, 1/10 of a second or 1 second, whatever, some discrete amount of time, and then hold an auction. And so if we're in this situation where I've got the best ask and the best bid, and then the world changes, boom, we all observe this announcement from the Fed, and then we all make sophisticated judgments about how that should affect prices, and then put in our orders based on that new information that we've all received at the same time. And then the market crosses supply and demand and identifies the efficient clearing price, the consensus view of the market. This, to me, is a much better way to perform exchange. And what this does is it greatly simplifies the market for everybody, for traders, exchanges, and regulators, and it introduces enormous opportunities for the operations researchers. And in particular, now computation is possible. It's possible with the traders, it's possible with the exchanges, and the regulators can understand the market. Whereas today, they've got rules against front running and all this stuff. Well, they can't observe front running because the front running is occurring at frequencies that are several orders of magnitude faster than the data stream that they get in the regulated feed. But this opportunity for computation at the exchange level is actually can be incredibly powerful, and we've seen this in electricity markets, where you get rich expression of preference. So rather than, now all these securities, even when it's the same security traded at different spots, even though they're closely interrelated, or they might be two legs of a hedge that you need to manage risk, they're all traded completely independently. And as a trader, you'd actually like to express your preferences for two legs of the hedge, or for perfect substitute products, and so on. And once you have any amount of time, like a tenth of a second or a second, then you can have the parties can express preferences as a linear program, and you can solve quite massive linear programs in a second. So the exchange could do the same thing that we do in electricity markets, where we, every 5 minutes, we're solving this combinatorial optimization to maximize social welfare. The exact same thing could happen in financial securities, maximize gain from trade, subject to constraints. Everything would need to be linear if we're going to be doing it every second. But it's certainly possible, and that's a big opportunity. It has not yet been adopted in, there's hints of it being adopted in various places. I'm quite confident that it will ultimately catch on, because it just makes so much sense. We're building a prototype, and to test it and make it more clear that it can be done. And we're running experiments, both in the lab and then eventually in tournaments, using Amazon Web Services as our exchange environment. And it enables us to answer all sorts of questions that we weren't able to answer in the initial paper, such as market stability, market fragmentation, how the market will evolve when it is fragmented, and then the importance of smart markets, where you can have richer expression of preferences. So let me conclude by saying, coming back to my few words in each of the areas, and we can see that some progress has been made. Probably the most progress has been made in electricity markets over the last 2 decades. Spectrum auctions have certainly been well introduced in communications, but the other areas we've really barely touched the surface. And so these are things that are enabled by existing technology. We can do them today. We just have to get them implemented in some markets, and then hopefully they'll grow and prosper. So still have plenty of work ahead, which I hope I'll be engaged in, and hopefully many of you as well. Thank you.
I see Peter is up to answer the
Question about the open access part, but maybe more generally. So, I guess the adversarial way of thinking, if these were really good ideas, why aren't the secondary marketplace implemented, or if there are, what do you mean?
Yeah, that is a good question. So, I mean, if you take that really seriously, then we all have nothing to do, because if it was a really good idea, it would have been done already. And so that's the $20 bill that's dropped on the ground. You see it there. And, well, it can't be a $20 bill because somebody would have picked it up. The reality in markets is that there is some tendency for things to get better. But that tendency is much stronger in private sector situations where the guy that's innovating gets to enjoy 100% of the returns from that innovation. In market design, especially these regulated markets, often that's not the case. So consider in financial markets, there's lots of broker-dealers and the high-frequency traders, lots of special interests that can step in the way. The regulator is extremely conservative because when they make changes, the changes have unforeseen unintended consequences, and they've seen this again and again, and it makes them more and more conservative. So when they look and they see, and we just think about this, so for example, spectrum auctions. Spectrum auctions were proposed by Ronald Coase in the 50s, and where he's testifying in the 50s to Congress about why this would be a good idea, and they're laughing at him. And then, we come back, and it takes many decades later before there's this window of opportunity. So, yeah, it would be nice if every good idea just immediately gets translated into practice, but there are lots of barriers. And some of these are regulatory. For example, there's existing laws in financial regulation, Regulation National Market System, or the Order Protection Rule, that effectively can be interpreted to block what I proposed, frequent batch auctions. So that would be one reason you can't do it. But in fact, we have gotten support from the SEC, from Mary Jo White, the chair, that actually it would be good to test something like this. Yes?
So if you buy treasury bonds, I think those are sold at batch auction. So then they've got this funny reserve. Maybe you could say a little more about that.
So the primary auctions for treasuries it is an auction. You're absolutely right.
And it is batched.
Yes, yeah, it is batched. It's discrete. And we observe auctions for many financial products. In fact, for equities, there's an auction at the open, there's an auction at the close, but there's continuous trading in between. And when the market's interrupted, they'll have an auction as well. But the primary market for treasuries is an auction, and it's the auction that I described, the single price auction, uniform price auction. But the trading of the bonds is not. So that is, in fact, that's a more troubled market than the equities market, because that's a over-the-counter market with very high inefficiencies. But again, a lot of special interests that are making money in less than perfect market. Yes.
So this is for market design and climate policy. So it seems like for international participation in such a design, there are always going to be an inherent problem of the time specificity or the time limit specificity that for the emissions allowance. Because the players that you want to encourage are from all different parts of the world,
Yes.
different geographic area and time zones. So there's going to be, there needs to be a delicate way of specifying what that time window is, because otherwise you're going to have trading inefficiencies that result depending on when the market's open and how first semester winter break in terms of production. But in Asia, that time window doesn't really apply. It's more around New Year's, Chinese New Year's and so forth. So when we set the emissions allowance for the entire market, looking at different markets, different players in that market bidding and trading what their allocation is, it's not always going to be efficient depending on what this time.
Right. Yeah, so you're certainly right that the big problem is all the countries. Let me say a few things. One, the idea of pricing carbon at the international level, we're actually not mandating a global trading system for allowances. That would be one approach, but instead the individual countries can decide whether they want to price carbon through a carbon tax or through tradable allowances. But one of the big things that focusing on the pricing carbon and letting the countries decide is the carbon revenues stay within the country, and so there's less distributional issues than would take place with a global cap and trade scheme. So I'm not suggesting that.
Right, but in Europe, so since the Kyoto Protocol in Europe, there has already been a market in which there are different players within Western Europe, of course, that are trading these allowances among themselves. But that doesn't really make sense if you don't want to encourage.
Correct. Yeah. So what we're trying to encourage is a global, an agreement to a global price path where every country, and not every country actually, so some coalition of the willing comes together and agrees that I will price carbon at $30 a ton starting now and going up over time, let's say, and that then the individual countries get to decide how they, how exactly they want to create that carbon price, whether through tax or through trading. But the there's certainly lots of details that I've skipped over, and we won't have time to follow through entirely.
Maybe we should thank Peter for the talk.